The big space station looked like a floating city. It had tall towers and bright lights that could be seen from far away. This was the Galactic Military Academy, the most important school for soldiers in the galaxy. For the first time ever, humans were coming to learn here. Commander Jake Harrison stepped off the transport ship. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. Next to him walked Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, a young woman with dark hair and sharp eyes. They both wore the blue uniforms of Earth's military. The alien students were waiting for them in the main hall. Jake had never seen so many different kinds of life forms in one place. Some looked like giant insects with 6 legs and shiny shells. Others were made of what looked like living crystal that glowed with soft colors. The strangest ones seemed to be made of pure light, floating in the air like ghosts. "Welcome to our academy," said Dean Morthick. He was the head of the school, a tall gray creature with no hair and big black eyes. "We are happy to have humans join us for the first time." Jake nodded. "Thank you for having us. We're here to learn from each other." The alien students watched them with curiosity. Most had never seen humans before. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or buzzing sounds. Others just stared. Amy noticed that many of the aliens seemed nervous around them. "Are they afraid of us?" she asked Jake quietly. "Maybe," Jake replied. "We're new here. They don't know what to expect." The first few days were strange for everyone. The alien students had been learning about war for years, but their idea of fighting was very different from humans. They studied battles like math problems. They talked about the best ways to win with the fewest deaths. They practiced fights where the losing side would give up quickly. Jake watched them during training exercises. The crystal beings would shine, different colors to show their battle plans. The insect-like aliens would work together like a perfect team, moving as one group. The light beings would float around the practice area, never actually touching anything. "This is not real fighting," Jake told Amy after watching a practice battle. "They're playing games." "Their games are very organized," Amy said. "But you're right. They don't understand what real war is like." The alien students were smart and learned quickly, but they all seemed to think that war was something clean and simple. They believed that when one side started losing, they would just stop fighting. They thought that soldiers would always follow rules and be nice to each other. During lunch, Jake sat with some of the students. A crystal being named Zeph-9 asked him, "Commander Jake, how do humans fight wars?" Jake thought for a moment. "We fight to protect what we love. We don't give up easily." "But what if you cannot win?" asked another student, one of the insect-like aliens. "We keep fighting anyway," Jake said. The aliens looked confused. One of the light beings spoke through a translator machine. "That does not make sense. Why fight if you cannot win?" "Because sometimes fighting is more important than winning," Amy said. Joining the conversation, the alien students exchanged looks. They didn't understand what she meant. Later that week, Jake had an idea. "We should show them some of our military history," he told Amy. "Maybe then they'll understand how humans really fight." Amy wasn't sure. "Are you sure that's a good idea? Some of our wars were pretty brutal. They need to know what they're dealing with if they're going to work with human soldiers," Jake said. "Better they learn now than be surprised later." Jake went to Dean Morthick with his idea. "I'd like to show the students some footage from human wars. It would help them understand our fighting style." The dean's gray skin turned a lighter color, which meant he was thinking hard. "I suppose it would be educational. Your species is known for being ... aggressive. Perhaps seeing your historical battles would help our students learn. When can we do this?" Jake asked. "Next week. We'll use the main auditorium. All students must attend." Jake spent the next few days choosing which battles to show. He started with older wars that seemed less shocking. The Civil War, World War I, battles where soldiers fought in organized lines. Then he added more recent conflicts. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Wars where the fighting was messier and more desperate. Amy helped him prepare the presentation. You sure about this? She asked again. Some of these battles were really hard to watch. They need to see what humans are capable of, Jake said. For better or worse, the day of the presentation arrived. The main auditorium was huge, with seats for over 200 students. Every alien cadet was there, along with many teachers. They all seemed excited to learn about human warfare. Jake stood at the front of the room with a remote control in his hand. Behind him was a giant screen that would show the battle footage. Amy sat in the front row, watching the alien faces. Today, you will see how humans fight, Jake announced. Some of this may be hard to watch, but it's important that you understand who we are and what we're capable of. The lights dimmed. The screen came to life. The first images appeared, showing soldiers from long ago marching across a field. The alien students leaned forward, ready to learn about human war. None of them knew what they were about to see. None of them understood what humans really did when they fought. In a few minutes, everything would change. The screen showed men in blue and gray uniforms walking across a grassy field. They carried old rifles and moved in straight lines. This was the Battle of Gettysburg from the American Civil War. The alien students watched with interest as the human soldiers marched toward each other. This is how humans fought long ago, Jake explained. They would line up and advance toward the enemy. The crystal beings glowed softly as they took notes. The insect-like students buzzed quietly to each other, analyzing the human formations. To them, it looked like a simple military exercise. The humans were organized and disciplined, just like alien soldiers. Then the shooting started. The screen showed smoke and fire as the two sides fired at each other. Men fell down and didn't get up. Other soldiers stepped over them and kept walking forward. The alien students watched more carefully now. They're not retreating, noted one of the light beings through its translator, even though their comrades are falling. That's correct, Jake said. Humans don't give up easily. The next footage showed World War I. Soldiers in muddy trenches, poison gas floating across battlefields. Men charging through barbed wire. The alien students began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the clean, organized warfare they had studied. Amy watched the alien faces. The crystal beings were dimming their natural light, which meant they were disturbed. They, insect-like students, had stopped buzzing to each other. Even the light beings seemed less bright than before. Why are they staying in those holes? Asked Zeph-9, the crystal being. The conditions looked terrible. Because they had to, Jake answered. If they left, the enemy would advance. So they stayed for months, even years. The footage moved to World War II. The alien students saw the beaches of Normandy, where thousands of human soldiers jumped out of boats and ran toward machine guns. Many died before they reached the sand. Others made it to the beach, only to be shot while trying to move forward. This is impossible, whispered one of the insect students. They're running straight into certain death. But they kept coming. Amy said from her seat, wave after wave of them. The screen showed more soldiers landing on the beach. They climbed over the bodies of dead comrades to reach cover. Some were wounded, but still crawled forward. Officers who had lost their weapons picked up rifles from fallen soldiers and continued fighting. The alien students were no longer taking notes. They watched in shocked silence as humans threw themselves against impossible odds. The crystal beings had become very dim. Several of the insect-like students were making distressed clicking sounds. "Why don't they surrender?" asked a light being. "Clearly they cannot win." "Watch," Jake said simply. The footage showed the same battle hours later. The humans had taken the beach. They were advancing inland, leaving behind thousands of dead. But they had won. They achieved victory through sacrifice, Dean Morthek observed, his gray skin turning pale. But at such a cost. The next segment showed fighting in the Pacific Islands. Humans battled in thick jungles where they could barely see the enemy. They fought in caves and on beaches, in heat that would kill most alien species. The footage showed soldiers sharing water with wounded enemies, carrying injured friends through dangerous areas. "The environment alone should have stopped them," noted one of the teachers, a being with blue skin and 4 arms. "How do they survive in such conditions?" "They adapt," Amy said. "Humans can live almost anywhere if they have to." The alien students watched footage of humans fighting in snow and ice, in deserts and mountains. They saw soldiers who had been without food for days still attacking enemy positions. They watched humans dig foxholes with their bare hands when they had no tools. Then came the footage that changed everything. The screen showed the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in Korea. Human Marines were surrounded by enemy forces in freezing weather. The temperature was so cold that most alien species would die within minutes. -30 degrees, Jake announced. The humans fought in this for weeks. The alien students watched in horror as frostbitten soldiers shared ammunition and carried wounded comrades through blizzards. Many humans could barely walk, but they refused to leave their injured behind. They fought their way through enemy lines while carrying their wounded. "This is not possible," stammered Zeph-9. "No species can function in such conditions." "Humans can," Jake said. The footage showed Marines with black frostbite on their faces still firing their weapons. Soldiers with frozen hands still helped wounded friends. Men who couldn't feel their feet still marched through the snow. That's when the first alien student stood up and walked out. It was one of the light beings. It simply faded away and disappeared, unable to watch anymore. The other students looked around nervously. They had never seen one of their classmates leave. During a lesson, "Perhaps we should stop here," suggested Dean Morthek. "This is quite intense." "No," Jake said firmly. "They need to see more. They need to understand what humans are really like." The footage continued with Vietnam. The alien students watched humans fighting in jungles, so thick they couldn't see. 5 feet ahead, they saw soldiers walking through swamps full of disease and danger. They watched humans fight an enemy they rarely saw, in a war that seemed to have no clear purpose. More alien students began to leave. The crystal beings were the next to go, their light growing dimmer until they simply faded away. They couldn't handle watching such violence and suffering. "Why do they keep fighting?" asked one of the remaining insect students. "They could just leave that place." "Because they were told to be there," Amy explained. "And humans don't abandon their duty." The screen showed a helicopter trying to rescue wounded soldiers. Enemy fire was hitting the aircraft, but the human crew kept trying to save their comrades. They made trip after trip, even though each flight might be their last. "They're risking their lives for soldiers who are already wounded," observed. "Teacher, that makes no tactical sense." "It makes perfect sense to a human," Jake said. By now, a third of the alien students had left the auditorium. Those who remained watched with growing horror as the footage showed humans in impossible situations, always fighting, never giving up. The next segment was about to begin. Jake looked at the remote control in his hand. The worst footage was still to come, the battles that would really show what humans were capable of. He looked at Amy, who nodded. They had to continue. The alien students needed to see the truth about humanity, no matter how shocking it might be. "The next footage is from Somalia," Jake announced. This will show you what happens when humans are trapped with no hope of rescue. The screen flickered, and a new battle began. The remaining alien students gripped their seats, not knowing that they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of humanity forever. The screen now showed a dusty city with narrow streets and tall buildings. This was Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. The alien students could see human soldiers moving carefully through the streets. Everything looked quiet and normal. This mission was supposed to be simple, Jake explained. A quick operation to capture some bad guys. It should have taken 1 hour. The footage showed helicopters flying over the city. Suddenly, one of them was hit by a rocket and started spinning. Out of control. It crashed into a building with a terrible sound of breaking metal and fire. "Oh no," whispered Zeph-9. "They should call for help and leave." "Watch what they do instead," Jake said. The screen showed more helicopters being shot down. Human soldiers were now trapped in the city, surrounded by thousands of angry people with weapons. The smart thing to do would be to retreat and get help. But that's not what the humans did. Instead, they fought their way toward the crash sites. They ran through streets full of gunfire to reach their fallen comrades. Even though they were outnumbered 100 to 1, they kept moving forward. "This is madness," said one of the insect students. "They're going to get themselves killed." "Some of them did," Amy said quietly, "but they went anyway." The alien students watched in shock as humans fought building by building through the hostile city. They saw soldiers carrying wounded friends while under fire. They watched humans share their last ammunition with each other. When their vehicles were destroyed, they fought on foot. More alien students began to leave. The crystal beings couldn't handle the violence. Their entire species had never experienced warfare like this. They had evolved past such brutal conflicts. Thousands of years ago. "Why don't they just surrender?" asked one of the few remaining light beings. "They could negotiate with the enemy." "Because they had friends who were hurt," Jake explained. "And humans don't abandon their friends." The footage showed the longest parts of the battle. Hours passed with continuous fighting. The humans were running out of ammunition and medical supplies. They were tired and hungry. Some were wounded but still fighting. "Look at this." Amy pointed to the screen. "This soldier has been shot in the leg. He can barely walk, but he's still helping others." The alien students watched a human soldier who was clearly in pain. He was bleeding and limping badly, but he was carrying supplies to other soldiers who needed them. When another human was shot, the wounded soldier helped carry him to safety. "He should be getting medical help himself," noted Dean Northuck. "Instead, he's helping others." "That's what humans do," Jake said. "We take care of each other." The battle continued on screen. The humans were trapped in a small area, surrounded by enemies. They had been fighting for over 12 hours. Most alien species would have given up by now, but the humans kept fighting. The footage showed something that made even more alien students leave. A human soldier ran into the open to drag a wounded comrade to safety. He was shot while doing it. Then another human ran out to help both of them. He was shot too. Then a third human ran out to help all three. "This is impossible," stammered one of the insect students. "They're just creating more casualties." "But they're saving lives too," Amy pointed out. "Look, the screen showed that despite being shot, the humans had managed to save their wounded friend. They had risked their lives to help someone who couldn't help himself. By now, more than half the alien students had left the auditorium. Those who remained were clearly disturbed by what they were seeing. The crystal beings had dimmed almost nothing. The insect students were making clicking sounds of distress. "Maybe we should stop," suggested one of the teachers. "This is clearly upsetting the students." "No," Jake said firmly. They need to see how it ends. The footage showed the final hours of the battle. The humans were almost out of ammunition. They were surrounded and outnumbered. There was no hope of rescue. This was when most species would surrender. But the humans didn't surrender. They kept fighting with whatever they had left. When they ran out of bullets, they used knives. When they ran out of knives, they used their hands. They formed a circle to protect their wounded and fought off attacks from all sides. "They're going to die," said Zeph-9. "All of them." "Some of them did," Jake said, "but they never stopped fighting." The screen showed rescue helicopters finally arriving. But the humans who were being rescued immediately asked about their friends. They wanted to make sure everyone was accounted for. Even while being carried to safety, they were worried about others. 18 hours of continuous fighting, Jake announced. Outnumbered, outgunned, no hope of rescue. And they never gave up. The remaining alien students sat in stunned silence. They had never seen anything like this. In their worlds, war was a game with rules. Soldiers surrendered when they were beaten. They negotiated when they were trapped. They didn't fight to the death for strangers. "I don't understand," said one of the insect students. "Why didn't they just leave their wounded and escape?" "Because that's not who we are," Amy said. "We don't leave people behind." The footage moved to the next conflict. This time it was Afghanistan. The alien students watched humans fighting in high mountains, where the air was too thin for most species to breathe. They saw soldiers climbing cliffs under enemy fire to reach their objectives. "The altitude alone should kill them," observed a teacher. "How do they function in such conditions?" "They adapt," Jake said. "Humans can survive almost anywhere." The screen showed humans fighting in caves and tunnels, pursuing enemies through underground passages. They fought in temperatures that ranged from freezing cold to burning hot. They carried heavy equipment up mountains that would challenge most alien species even without the weight. More students left. The few who remained were clearly struggling with what they were seeing. This wasn't the clean, organized warfare they had studied. This was brutal, desperate fighting where humans pushed themselves beyond what should be possible. "They're like machines," whispered one of the light beings. "But machines that feel pain and fear." "They're not machines," Amy said. "They're just human." The footage showed a human soldier who had been fighting for days without sleep. He was exhausted and wounded, but when he heard that other soldiers were in trouble, he went to help them. He carried extra ammunition through dangerous territory to reach friends who needed it. He could have stayed safe, noted Dean Morthick, but he chose to risk his life for others. "That's what humans do," Jake said. "We protect each other." By the time the Afghanistan footage ended, only about 30 alien students remained in the auditorium. The others had left, unable to handle the reality of human warfare. Those who stayed were clearly changed by what they had seen. The next footage was about to begin. Jake looked at the few remaining students. They had survived this much, but the hardest part was still coming. The footage that would show them what humans were truly capable of when everything was on the line. "The next segment is from recent conflicts," Jake announced. "This will show you modern human warfare." The screen flickered again. The remaining alien students braced themselves for what was coming next. The screen now showed footage from helmet cameras. The alien students could see exactly what human soldiers saw during combat. They could hear the soldiers breathing, hear their hearts beating fast, hear them talking to each other during fights. "This is from Iraq," Jake explained. "These soldiers are going house to house, looking for enemies hiding in a city." The footage showed humans entering buildings where they knew enemies were waiting. They knew it was dangerous, but they went in anyway. The alien students could hear the soldiers' voices as they moved through dark rooms and narrow hallways. "Contact." "Front," said a voice on the screen. Gunfire erupted. The camera shook as the soldier dove for cover. But instead of retreating, the humans moved forward toward the shooting. "They're advancing toward the enemy fire," observed one of the remaining insect students. "That goes against all tactical training. Sometimes you have to go toward the danger to stop it." Amy explained. The footage showed soldiers working together to clear each room. When one was wounded, others immediately moved to help him. They carried him to safety while still fighting. Off the enemy. Nobody was left behind. "Look at this," Jake pointed to the screen. "This soldier is bleeding from his arm, but he's still fighting." The alien students watched a human who had been shot continue to operate his weapon. He was in obvious pain, but he kept providing cover fire so his friends could move safely. When asked if he needed help, he said he was fine. "He's not fine," noted Zeph-9. "He needs medical attention." "But he's not stopping," Amy said. "He'll keep fighting until the mission is done." The footage moved to a different battle. This time it showed special operations soldiers rescuing hostages from a building. The humans moved like shadows, perfectly coordinated, taking out enemies before they could hurt the innocent people inside. "How do they move so precisely?" asked one of the light beings. "They seem to know exactly where everyone is." "Training," Jake said. "Thousands of hours of practice. They've done this so many times, it's like breathing." The screen showed the rescue operation. The humans moved through the building with deadly efficiency. But when they found the hostages, they were gentle and caring. They spoke softly to scared children and helped elderly people walk to safety. "They can switch from violence to compassion instantly," observed Dean Morthick. "One moment they're deadly warriors, the next they're protectors." "That's the point," Amy said. "We fight so others don't have to." The most shocking footage came next. It showed a human soldier who had been separated from his unit. He was alone, wounded, and surrounded by enemies. Any sane person would surrender, but this human kept fighting. "He's by himself," whispered one of the insect students. "He should give up. Watch," Jake said. The lone soldier fought for hours. He moved from position to position, always staying ahead of the enemy. He was bleeding and exhausted, but he never stopped. He used every trick he knew to survive. "What is he fighting for?" asked Zeph-9. "He has no hope of winning." "He's fighting to stay alive," Amy said, "and to maybe help his friends who are looking." For him, the footage showed rescue helicopters finally finding the soldier. When they pulled him to safety, he was more worried about his friends than himself. He wanted to know if everyone else was okay. "Even after all that, he's thinking about others," noted a teacher. The final segment showed the most recent conflicts. Humans fighting in cities destroyed by war, helping civilians while battling enemies. They shared their food with hungry children and carried wounded enemies to medical care. "They're helping their enemies," observed one of the light beings. "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense," Jake said. "Just because someone is shooting at you doesn't mean you stop being human." The footage showed soldiers building schools and hospitals while still fighting a war. They would patrol dangerous streets during the day and help construct playgrounds. At night, they were warriors and builders at the same time. "This is unprecedented," said Dean Morthick. "Most species see warfare and construction as completely separate activities. For humans, they're connected," Amy explained. "We fight, too. Protect things, and we build to give people hope." The presentation ended with footage of human soldiers coming home. The alien students watched as families reunited with warriors who had seen terrible things. They saw strong fighters crying as they hugged their children. They saw people who had been through hell returning to normal lives. "They can just go back to being regular people?" asked Zeph-9. "They never stopped being regular people," Jake said. They just did extraordinary things when they had to. The lights came on in the auditorium. Only 30 alien students remained out of the original 200. They sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had seen. Their understanding of warfare, of humanity, of violence itself had been completely changed. "I have a question," said one of the insect students. "Are all humans like this?" Jake and Amy looked at each other. "Every human has the capacity for this," Jake said. "Most never need to use it. But when push comes to shove, when people we care about are in danger, yes, we can all be like this." "That's terrifying," whispered a like being. "It should be," Amy said. "But it should also be comforting. Because if we're on your side, you never have to worry about being abandoned." The alien students began to understand something important. The humans they had been watching weren't monsters. They were protectors. Their capacity for violence was matched by their capacity for love and sacrifice. "The soldiers in those battles," Zeph 9 said slowly, "they weren't fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting for each other." "Now you're starting to understand," Jake said. Dean Morthuk. Skin had turned very pale. "We need to discuss what this means for our military doctrine. If humans can fight like this, what does that make them in the context of galactic warfare?" "It makes them exactly what we need," said one of the teachers quietly. "Because if there's ever a threat that conventional methods can't handle, we now know who to call." The remaining alien students filed out of the auditorium in silence. They had come to learn about human military tactics. Instead, they had learned about the human soul. They had seen what people could become when everything they loved was threatened. That night, the academy was quieter than usual. The alien students who had stayed were deep in thought. The ones who had left were requesting transfers to other programs. Everyone was trying to understand what they had witnessed. But one thing was clear to all of them. Humans were not just another species joining the galactic community. They were something entirely different. Something that could be gentle and caring one moment and absolutely relentless the next. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have humanity as an ally. And somewhere in the depths of space, ancient threats that had been sleeping for millennia would soon discover what it meant to have humanity as an enemy. The days after the presentation were strange at the academy. Students who had left were packing their belongings and requesting transfers to other schools. Those who stayed avoided Jake and Amy in the hallways. When the two humans entered the dining hall, conversation stopped and aliens looked away. "They're afraid of us," Amy said quietly as they sat alone at a table. "Can you blame them?" Jake replied. "We just showed them what humans do when we're pushed to the limit." The academy was in chaos. Emergency meetings were held every day. Teachers argued about whether the human integration program should continue. Some wanted to send Jake and Amy home immediately. Others thought it was too late to pretend they hadn't seen what they'd seen. Dean Morthuk called Jake and Amy to his office. His gray skin was even paler than usual, and his big black eyes looked tired. "Commander Harrison, Lieutenant Rodriguez," he said formally, "the Academy Board has been discussing your presentation. Many of our students have left the program. The ones who remain are disturbed. We showed them the truth," Jake said. "They asked to learn about human warfare. That's what human warfare looks like. But the level of violence, the refusal to surrender, the willingness to die for strangers." The dean shook his head. "It's beyond what most species can comprehend." "Maybe that's the problem," Amy said. "Maybe they've been sheltered too long." "Sheltered?" The dean's skin turned slightly green, showing his agitation. "Our species evolved beyond such barbarism thousands of years ago. We found better ways to solve conflicts." "And what happens when you meet something that didn't evolve beyond barbarism?" Jake asked. "What happens when you face an enemy that doesn't want to negotiate?" The dean had no answer for that. Outside the office, the few remaining alien students were trying to continue their normal classes. But everything had changed. They couldn't look at their human instructors the same way. They couldn't think about warfare as a theoretical exercise anymore. Zeph-9 approached Jake and Amy in the library. Her crystal form was dim and flickering, with confused colors. "I need to understand something," she said. "In all that footage, I saw humans dying for people they didn't know. I saw them sharing food with enemies. I saw them carrying wounded strangers to safety. How can the same beings who are so violent also be so kind?" Jake set down his book. "Because they're not separate things, Zeph-9. The same drive that makes us fight to the death also makes us protect innocent people. We're not violent because we enjoy it. We're violent because sometimes it's necessary. But the way you fight," she continued, "it's so dot intense, so personal. Other species fight with their minds, calculating the best strategies. Humans fight with their hearts. That's what makes the difference," Amy said. "When you fight with your heart, you don't give up. You can't give up because you're not just fighting for yourself." Word of the presentation spread throughout the galaxy. Military leaders from different species requested copies of the footage. Some were horrified. Others were fascinated. All of them were concerned about what it meant to have humans as allies or enemies. The Ethereal Council, made up of the most advanced species in the galaxy, held an emergency meeting. They had never encountered a species quite like humans before. Their capacity for violence is matched only by their capacity for sacrifice, reported the Council's military advisor. They're not conquerors in the traditional sense. They're protectors who will use any means necessary to protect what they care about. "Are they dangerous?" asked a council member. "Extremely," the advisor replied, "but only to those who threaten innocent people." Back at the academy, the remaining alien students were slowly coming to terms with what they had learned. They began to see Jake and Amy not as monsters, but as representatives of something far more complex. Got one of the insect students approached them during lunch. "Commander Jake, I've been thinking about what we saw. The humans in those battles, they weren't just following orders, were they?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They were making personal choices. Each soldier decided for himself whether to run toward danger or away from it. And they chose to run toward it." "That's right," Jake said. "Nobody forced them. They chose to fight because they believed it was right." "But why?" the student asked. "Why choose the hard path when there are easier options?" "Because the easy path doesn't always lead to the right place," Amy said. "Sometimes you have to do difficult things to protect the people you care about." The conversation was overheard by other students. Slowly, they began to understand that human violence wasn't mindless or evil. It was directed and purposeful. Humans fought not because they wanted to, but because they felt they had to. This realization changed everything. The alien students who had been afraid began to see humans differently. They were still dangerous, but they were dangerous in the same way that a guard dog was dangerous, only to those who meant harm. "You know what's really scary?" Zeph-9 said to her friends one day. "It's not that humans are violent. It's that they're violent and they have moral codes. They could probably conquer the galaxy if they wanted to, but they don't want to. They just want to protect things." The Academy's board of directors met again. This time, their discussion was different. "We've been thinking about this wrong," said one of the board members. "We've been treating humans as just another species with unusual military tactics, but they're not. They're something entirely new." "What do you mean?" asked Dean Morthick. "They're a species that has mastered warfare without losing their compassion. They can be absolutely ruthless when necessary, but they can also be incredibly gentle. They're warriors and peacekeepers at the same time." "So what do we do with them?" asked another board member. We don't do anything with them, the first member replied. We learn from them, and we hope they stay on our side. The decision was made to continue the human integration program, but with changes. Instead of trying to teach humans about alien warfare, they would learn about human warfare. The focus would be on understanding when and how to apply human tactics. But we can't train our students to fight like humans, protested one teacher. Our species aren't capable of that level of intensity. No, agreed Dean Morthick, but we can learn to recognize when human-style warfare might be necessary. And we can learn to work alongside humans when the time comes. Jake and Amy found themselves teaching different classes now. Instead of learning alien military theory, they taught alien students about human psychology and motivation. They explained why humans fought the way they did and when such tactics might be needed. The key to understanding human warfare, Jake told a small class of remaining students, is understanding that we don't see it as warfare at all. We see it as protection. Every battle we showed you is really about protecting something or someone. Even the big wars? Asked one of the insect. Students, the world wars? Especially those, Amy said. Humans fought those wars to protect their way of life, their families, their freedom. They weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for ideas and people they loved. The students began to understand something important. Human military doctrine wasn't really about winning battles. It was about protecting things that couldn't protect themselves. This explained why humans fought so hard and never gave up. News of the Academy's decision spread throughout the galaxy. The reaction was mixed. Some species were relieved that humans would be integrated into galactic military forces. Others were concerned about what would happen when human warriors were unleashed. The Galactic Council held a special session to discuss the human question. Representatives from hundreds of species debated what to do about these new allies. They're too dangerous, argued one representative. Their capacity for violence is unlimited. But it's directed violence, countered another. They only fight to protect others. That makes them the perfect peacekeepers. What if they decide we're the threat? Asked a third representative. What? If they turn that violence against us? Admiral Chun, the human representative to the council, stood up to address the assembly. Honorable representatives, I understand your concerns. But let me ask you this. In all the footage you've seen, in all the battles we've shown you, did you ever see humans attacking innocent people? The assembly was quiet. They had to admit that in every battle, humans had gone out of their way to protect civilians and help wounded enemies. Humans fight hard, Admiral Chun continued, but we fight for the right reasons. We're not here to conquer anyone. We're here to help protect everyone. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. Humans would be integrated into the galactic military, but as a special force. They would be called upon only when conventional methods failed. Back at the academy, the remaining alien students were learning to work with their human instructors. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with respect and understanding. I have a question, Zeph9 said during one class. What happens when humans fight each other? We saw footage of your civil war and world wars. How do you fight so hard? Against your own species? Jake thought carefully before answering. That's the saddest part of human history. When we fight each other, it's usually because we disagree about what's worth protecting. Both sides think they're fighting for something important, but you eventually make peace.